front of sanctuary, left of the bima, back of the section. That's where my family always sat for the high holidays when I was growing up. It was a good place to sit. It wasn't too close. I don't think the rabbi could usually see me. It was annoyingly far away from the door, so you had to walk by a lot of people every time you went in and out, but it's fine. It was our spot. And so I would sit there on the pew bench tucked in between my mom and my dad, and every little while my mom would reach into the side compartment of her little synagogue bag and pull out a loose purse tic-tac. A purse tic-tac, for the uninitiated, is a mint that lives in the wild, swimming around with all of the dirt and the debris that lives in the side pocket of a purse that is never cleaned, rather than in the controlled and more hygienic, but also very much louder, natural habitat of a tic-tac container. And so I would sit in synagogue, my mom would pop tic-tacs, I would braid the fringes of my dad's talit, and I would listen to the words of the liturgy that I so loved. I didn't really understand it, mostly because at that point I didn't need to. The tunes and the tropes, they comforted me. For more than 30 years, my mom ate tic-tacs in shul while I contentedly listened to the voices and the rhythms and the melodies. And then my mom got sick, and we knew from day one that she wasn't going to make it, and out of nowhere, that liturgy that we're talking about, what had felt like a vague and general book of life, was suddenly real, and it was slamming shut. And I was forced to wrestle with words that suddenly infuriated me. Who will live and who will die? Who after a long life and who before their time? I hated those words. They made me feel physically ill and full of rage and panic and dread. It wasn't even for me at that point a theological conflict. I have been well-versed for a long time in the idea of reframing, reinterpreting, re-understanding words and concepts that don't fit into my worldview. I wasn't worried about God causing sickness and death. What hurt me was that it was just so real. These words about sickness and death, about grieving and missing, that was now my reality, and it felt cruel. That my safe space, my comfort zone, my front of sanctuary, left of bima, back of the section, tic-tacs in the side pocket spot was no longer mine. And the words of the Unatana Tokef were rubbing that right in my face. Just 3 years later, we were all confronted with the same words. This time, not in individual experiences, but in a global pandemic. There was not a rabbi or a cantor in the world that did not think to themselves in 2020, how on earth can I possibly read or sing these words this year? Who will live and who will die? Who by earthquake and who by plague? I remember that Zoom call, sitting with the clergy team and thinking endlessly about how we might frame this moment for all of you. What could we possibly say that would explain away how cruel and painful it was to sing the words, who will die and who by plague, mid-pandemic? And here we are, 2022, and I find myself yet again in a fight with the prayer book. This time, not with the words of the Unatana Tokef. We're actually doing okay at the moment. We're never going to be best friends, but it's okay. This year, I find myself at odds with one of our more central concepts of the high holidays. And you might know, after 40 days of preparing for today, the whole month of Elul, all of Rosh Hashanah, the 10 days in between, Yom Kippur last night, I have stopped counting just how many times we have mentioned and read and prayed and sang words about return. All of Rosh Hashanah, we said, Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva, return us, God, and we will return. And last night, as we departed, we sang, we return to you, again and again. We return. In love and in hope, we return. It's a lot of return. Return to what? Return implies that we're supposed to go back, that we're someplace that we're not supposed to be, and that we have to retreat. Return implies that you have had a great vacation and now you're ready to go home, that the clothes that you bought didn't fit and now you want your money back, that something has to turn around and go back. Back to what? I'm mad at the prayer book again because at this moment, return feels wrong, misdirected and misguided and impossible. And that feels a little heartbreaking. Because after 2.5 years of pandemic, we have lived through so much change that if we stop and look back on who we were before all of this started, we find our pre-March 1st, 2020 world to be a little blurry. It's out of focus, unfamiliar. We're looking back on a life that we don't recognize anymore. So return to what on these high holy days? Return to those of my childhood, to purse tic-tacs and tallis braids and the simplicity of familiarity and the sanctuary left of bima, back of section. Return to 2018, to my very first high holy days here at Emanuel, my first as a single mom, my first without my mom, my first as a congregational rabbi, filled with pride and promise and a little pain and a lot of panic. We could return to 2019, a year that now feels full of innocence and blessed ignorance. We were blissfully consumed by things that now feel inconsequential, unaware of what was around the corner. We could return to the last 2 years, to Zoom calls and lonely break fasts and delivering sermons to a sanctuary of 1,700 empty seats. I know I cannot go back, not to any of it, the good or the bad. And even though there is a part of me that craves what was, that wishes desperately for the tunes and the prayers and the voices and the rhythms and the tic-tacs of my youth, there is a part of me that wishes that we were a generation that did not know this kind of infection and isolation. There is a part of me, of all of us, that will always look back with longing, with yearning for that blissful and blessed ignorance, for the beauty of what the past looked like through the eyes of who we were then. But we know that those eyes don't see the same today. We cannot go back to those eyes, to that time, to that pew. So return to what? Well, maybe we should be asking what return really means. In the context of teshuvah, or repentance, making it right when we have done something wrong, teshuvah literally translates to return. And Maimonides teaches that we have not fully done teshuvah. We have not yet made it right. The return is not yet complete until we are confronted with the same situation where we originally went wrong and we choose a different path. That means that real return might only happen when you choose a road you've never been down before. If you chose a path and it was wrong, now you have to choose another. That's teshuvah. Return is the unknown. The path not yet taken. Return is potential. It's possibility. Return is change. It's change. I told you on Erev Rosh Hashanah that I felt the weight of the world too. I told you that even though we feel like we're supposed to be okay, the burden that we're carrying is still heavy. It's too heavy. And so I asked you to put it down and to rest and to give yourself a moment to ease the pain. I promised you that we weren't giving up, that we were going to return. We were going to pick it all back up. And so we are, and I am too. In these last hours before the gates of Yom Kippur close, I'm thinking about that weight and this return. But if return is about moving forward and embracing change, then we're not going back. Rather, we're returning to the project of what might be. So I'm sorting through the clutter and the heaviness of these last years and deciding what to carry forward into what's next. I don't really want to keep fighting with the prayer book. And so, as I choose today to reinterpret some of the words of our liturgy so that they fit me, so that they fit who I am right now, I'm also picking up and bringing with me the weight of the tradition of making it make sense. And I'm bringing the gift of finding new meaning in old words and rituals. Let me give you an example of how this works. I've officiated a lot of weddings since the lockdown lifted. Everyone wants to be married, in fear that it will close again. As you probably know, and they'll lose their deposit. As you probably know, at the very end of a wedding, right before these almost newlyweds make out in public, one of them smashes a glass. And very often, that glass is a special glass, and it's saved, and a keepsake from a moment of beauty and celebration is created. And this custom, over the last 2 years, became for me not just about 2,000 years of history, but about those last 2 years as well. You see, our tradition is full of reasons why we break a glass at the end of a wedding ceremony. Most common is that we know too well the brokenness of our past. There are many moments, too many moments in the 2,000 years of Jewish community and world history that were full of destruction and despair. We don't want to forget them or pretend that they don't inform who we are, and so we break that glass as a reminder of that brokenness. And we keep the pieces so that we can bring that pain and what it has taught us with us into the beauty of what we are building. Just like that glass, we each have brokenness in our past and in us. Our instinct when something is broken is to mend it, to fix it, to fit the pieces back together so that you can't even tell that it was ever broken, to return it to its former perfection. But actually, our brokenness is what makes us who we are. It's what makes us beautiful. Rather than piecing and gluing the glass back together in search of a return back to its original unbrokenness, we leave the pieces distinct and we let them become something new. We make art from them. Brokenness doesn't make us weak or hold us back. It opens up countless new possibilities. Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Katsk would say, "Ein davar shalem yoter milev shavur." There is nothing more whole than a broken heart. I cannot return to the high holidays of my childhood. I cannot return to a moment in time when I did not know grief or loneliness and regret. I cannot return to a world in which I am not a little broken. But the brokenness in me sees the brokenness in you. And I know you. And though we know heartbreak and hardship, we also know hard work and we know happiness. We know joy and love and celebration and gratitude and the creation of new things. And together, because we share in the knowledge of what it is to break, we share in our return. On Rosh Hashanah, I had to put down what was heavy because I was afraid that I might shatter. But instead, I found beauty in the broken. I found new meaning in what is old. And now I'm strong enough, we're strong enough to pick it back up and to pick you up and carry you and our burdens if you need it as we make our way back to the road forward, back to the project of what this might be. It's what we do. So we'll spend this year learning and praying and gathering and planning and building and fixing. Come when you're ready and join us. And so I pray on this Yom Kippur day that we continue to return together to our memories of what was, to learn from them, even though we can't go back to them. That we return to our dreams of what might be because we are potential. In our brokenness, we can find and pick up and carry 1,000,000 tiny broken pieces out of which we are going to build a world that we are proud of, that we want for our children. And so we ask you today, God, Shema Kolenu, hear our prayer of return.